I had my hand on the bedroom door when I heard my wife's laugh. The problem was, I wasn't supposed to be home for another 3 hours. For a moment, I stood frozen in the hallway. Maybe she was on the phone. Maybe the television was on. Maybe there was some innocent explanation that my 68-year-old brain hadn't thought of yet. Then I heard a man's voice, a voice I knew better than my own, my son-in-law, Ethan. I remember staring at that door while my heart hammered against my ribs so hard it actually hurt. I wanted to burst inside. I wanted to kick the door open. I wanted answers. But before I could move, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was my daughter, Emily. I almost ignored it. Thank God I didn't, I answered in a whisper. Emily. Her voice came through immediately. Dad, where are you? I frowned. At home. The silence on the other end lasted less than 2 seconds. But it changed my life. Then she said something that made the blood drain from my face. Dad, don't go into that room. My hand slipped from the doorknob. What? I know what you're hearing. I felt my knees weaken. What are you talking about? Another pause. Then my daughter whispered, Please trust me. Don't say a word. Not yet. I wish I could tell you I handled that moment like a strong man. I didn't. I stood there trembling. The woman I had been married to for 11 years was inside our bedroom. My son-in-law's was with her. And somehow my daughter already knew. If you've ever experienced betrayal, then you know there are moments when reality feels broken. Nothing makes sense. Nothing fits together. You begin questioning every memory you've ever had. That's exactly what happened to me. My name is Dorian Wells. I'm 70 years old. I spent 42 years running a successful construction company in Ohio. I buried my first wife 13 years ago after a long battle with cancer. She was the love of my life. After she died, I honestly thought my story was over. Then I met Vanessa, charming. She was beautiful, funny. She made me laugh during a time when I didn't think I would ever laugh again. 3 years later, we were married. I believed God had given me a second chance. Turns out I was wrong. Very wrong. Standing outside that bedroom door, I wanted to storm inside and burn my entire world to the ground. Instead, my daughter said 4 words. Please trust me, Dad. And I did. I turned around, walked out of my own house, got into my truck, and drove away. To this day, I still don't know how I managed it. Could you have done it? Honestly. If you caught your spouse with someone you trusted, would you confront them immediately? Or would you stay silent? Because what happened next is something I never could have imagined. I drove to a park 15 minutes away. Emily met me there. The second she got out of her car, I knew something was terribly wrong. My daughter looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Like she'd been carrying a burden for a very long time. She sat beside me on a bench overlooking a small lake. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she finally looked at me. Dad, how much do you trust me? I laughed bitterly. Right now, you're the only person I trust. She nodded. Then tears filled her eyes. And that's when I knew. Whatever she was about to tell me was bigger than an affair. Much bigger. Dad, she said quietly, I've known about Ethan and Vanessa for almost 8 months. The world seemed to stop. 8 months. Not 8 days. Not 8 weeks. 8 months. I stared at her. You knew? She nodded. I could see the guilt crushing her. I wanted to tell you. Then why didn't you? Her answer would haunt me for weeks. Because they're not just having an affair. I felt a knot form in my stomach. What do you mean? Emily looked around to make sure nobody was listening. Then she leaned closer and whispered something that changed everything. They're trying to take everything from you. I felt ice run through my veins. Everything, my house, my savings, my company shares, my retirement investments, everything. At first I thought she was exaggerating. I wanted to believe she was wrong. But then she opened a folder and began showing me evidence, emails, bank transfers, text messages, photographs, names, dates, conversations. The deeper I looked, the worse it became. By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. Because this wasn't a random affair. This wasn't passion. This wasn't love. It was a plan, a carefully constructed plan. And according to my daughter, I was the target. What Emily revealed next was so shocking that I barely slept for the next month. But before I tell you what she discovered, I want to ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you never imagined they could betray you? Because that's exactly where I was. And I was about to learn the most painful lesson of my life. If you're ready to hear what happened next, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel around the world. And if you've ever experienced betrayal, let me know below, because you're not alone. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to Dorian's Revenge Stories, and turn on notifications, because what happened next was something nobody saw coming. And trust me, we're only getting started. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I sat alone in my truck outside a 24-hour diner, staring through the windshield while the evidence folder rested on the passenger seat beside me. Every few minutes I would open it again. Every few minutes I hoped something would suddenly stop making sense, that maybe there was another explanation. Maybe my daughter had misunderstood. Maybe Ethan and Vanessa weren't trying to destroy me. Maybe all of this was some terrible misunderstanding. But every page told the same story. And the deeper I looked, the worse it got. Around 3 in the morning, I finally called Emily. She answered on the first ring. I don't think she was sleeping either. "Tell me everything," I said. The line went quiet. Then she sighed. "Okay." And that's when the real nightmare began. 8 months earlier, Emily had noticed something strange. Not between Ethan and Vanessa. Not at first. It started with money. Specifically with questions. Questions Ethan had never asked before. Questions about my finances. Questions about my investments. Questions about my properties. Questions about my will. At first she thought nothing of it. After all, Ethan was family. Or at least she thought he was. Then the questions became more specific. What percentage of my company did I still own? What happened if I died without updating my trust? How much was my lake property worth? Had I ever considered selling the business completely? Looking back now, the warning signs seem obvious. But when people trust someone, they explain away things they should investigate. Maybe you've done that before. Maybe you've ignored a red flag because you wanted to believe the best about someone. I know I did. And it nearly cost me everything. Emily told me she became suspicious when she accidentally saw Ethan searching legal documents one evening. Not normal legal documents. Documents involving inheritance disputes, trust litigation, estate challenges, spousal claims. The kinds of documents nobody casually reads for fun. That's when she started paying attention. And once she started paying attention, everything changed. She noticed Ethan guarding his phone, deleting messages, taking calls outside, working late more often. Then one night she followed him. Not because she wanted to, because she had to, and what she found shattered her. He wasn't working late. He was meeting Vanessa, my wife, her stepmother, the woman who hugged her at family dinners, the woman who called herself family. the woman who smiled in photographs beside us. They were meeting at a hotel 30 minutes away. Together, Emily admitted that seeing them walk into that hotel nearly broke her. But instead of confronting them, she did something else. She started collecting evidence, just like a detective. And for months she watched, waited, recorded, documented, built her case. The same way a hunter waits for the perfect moment. The same way a chess player thinks 10 moves ahead. The same way my daughter had always approached problems. Patiently, strategically, relentlessly. Then she discovered something even worse. The affair wasn't the goal. The affair was merely a symptom. The real goal was money. My money. Emily forwarded herself copies of messages, emails, documents, plans. The more she uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Ethan and Vanessa believed I was getting old. 70 years old, successful, comfortable, trusting. Exactly the kind of man they thought they could manipulate. And apparently they'd been discussing it for years. Years, not months. Years. I remember gripping my phone tighter as Emily talked. Every sentence felt like another knife. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Dad, they weren't planning to wait." I frowned. "What does that mean?" Another pause. Then she answered. "They were accelerating everything." I didn't understand. Not at first. Then she explained. Vanessa had recently convinced me to revise portions of my estate planning. Small changes. Nothing dramatic, or so I thought. But according to the documents Emily found, those changes weren't accidental. They were strategic, carefully calculated, designed to shift control over assets, designed to create vulnerabilities, designed to make challenges easier later. And Ethan was helping. Helping from inside the family. Helping while pretending to be a loving husband. Helping while pretending to respect me. Have you ever discovered that someone close to you was wearing a mask? Not a small mask. A complete identity. A performance. Because that's what this felt like. Like waking up and realizing half the people around you were actors. And I was the audience. Emily told me there was more. Much more. But she needed me to stay calm. "Dad, listen carefully. I'm listening. You cannot confront them." I laughed bitterly. "I already didn't. No. I mean ever. Not yet." I rubbed my face. "Emily, how much worse can this get?" The silence that followed terrified me. Then she said, "I think they're planning something for next month." My stomach dropped. What kind of something? I don't know yet. But whatever it is, they think they're about to win. That sentence stayed with me. They think they're about to win. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The unusual kindness, the sudden affection, the way Vanessa kept encouraging me to relax more, travel more, delegate more, trust more. I had mistaken manipulation for love, and now I was paying the price. Around sunrise, Emily finally revealed the reason she'd stopped me from opening that bedroom door. The reason she'd begged me to stay silent. The reason she'd carried this burden for 8 months. "Dad." "Yeah? If you'd walked in there tonight, then what? They would have changed their plans." I understood immediately. Every piece of evidence, every document, every email, every mistake they had made would disappear. The trap would vanish, and we'd never know how deep it really went. Emily wasn't trying to stop me from getting justice. She was trying to make sure we got all of it. Not half, not some, all of it. And for the first time that night, I realized my daughter wasn't protecting me from heartbreak. She was preparing for war. But neither of us knew that within days we would uncover something far worse than an affair. Something that would reveal exactly how long Vanessa and Ethan had been planning this, and why they believed my downfall was already guaranteed. What Emily found next nearly sent me straight to the police. But looking back now, thank God I listened to her, because if I hadn't, none of what happened afterward would have been possible. And believe me when I say this, the next discovery changed everything. For the next 5 days, I lived 2 separate lives. The first life was the one everyone saw. I sat across from Vanessa at breakfast. I smiled when she smiled. I listened when she talked about gardening. I nodded when she asked about my day. I kissed her goodnight. And every single second of it made me sick. The second life was the one nobody knew about. The life where my daughter and I were quietly digging through years of lies. Every evening after Vanessa fell asleep, I drove to Emily's house. We sat at her dining room table, laptop screens glowing, coffee growing cold, searching for answers. And eventually, we found them. It happened on a Thursday night. I remember the exact moment because Emily suddenly stopped typing. She stared at her screen, then looked at me, then looked back at the screen again. The expression on her face told me everything. Something was wrong, very wrong. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she slowly turned the laptop toward me. "Dad." Her voice sounded different, almost shaken. "I think we just found the reason." "The reason for what?" "The reason they chose you." My chest tightened. I looked down at the screen. At first I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then I saw the names: Vanessa, Ethan, a third person, someone neither of us recognized. And beneath the names, a business proposal, a detailed business proposal, one that involved land, my land. I felt my pulse spike. "What is this?" Emily leaned back. "I think it's the beginning." The document was almost 3 years old. 3 years. Long before I had any reason to suspect anything. Long before Ethan's affair. Long before most of the strange behavior. And according to the document, a real estate development company had been quietly studying properties throughout the county, including mine, especially mine. You see, there was something I haven't told you. 20 years earlier, I had purchased nearly 300 acres of undeveloped land just outside town. Most people thought it was worthless, a retirement investment, nothing more. But recently, the area had exploded in value. New highways, new businesses, new developments. Suddenly, that worthless land wasn't worthless anymore. Developers wanted it. Investors wanted it. Everyone wanted it. And I had repeatedly refused to sell. I liked knowing it would stay untouched. I liked knowing future generations could enjoy it. Apparently, that decision had frustrated a lot of people, including the people connected to the proposal sitting in front of me. I continued reading. And then I found the sentence that changed everything. Subject acquisition strategy through marital asset positioning. I read it twice, then a third time. My stomach dropped. "Emily, I know. Tell me I'm reading this wrong." She shook her head. I wasn't reading it wrong. Not even close. Because according to the proposal, the easiest way to gain control of the property wasn't through purchase. It was through inheritance, through legal claims, through marriage, through strategic positioning, through me. The realization hit me like a freight train. Vanessa hadn't simply fallen in love with me. Someone had identified me as an opportunity, a target, a pathway. And the deeper we dug, the uglier it became. By midnight, we'd uncovered dozens of communications, encrypted messages, financial records, draft agreements. And every new discovery pointed in the same direction. The affair wasn't the center of the story. The land was. The money was. I was. At some point, I pushed away from the table and walked outside. I couldn't breathe. The cool night air hit my face. I stood there, staring into the darkness, trying to process the possibility that years of my life might have been built on a lie. Have you ever had that feeling? That horrible moment when your entire understanding of reality suddenly collapses? If you have, tell me in the comments, because I don't think anyone truly understands it until they've lived through it. A few minutes later, Emily joined me outside. She handed me a bottle of water. I didn't take it. Instead, I asked the question I had been avoiding. Do you think she ever loved me? Emily looked down, then away, then back at me, and her answer broke my heart. I don't know. Not yes, not no. I don't know. The truth is, that uncertainty hurt more than anything else, because betrayal is painful, but uncertainty is torture. You keep replaying memories, moments, conversations, vacations, anniversaries, birthdays, trying to determine which parts were real, trying to figure out whether any of it mattered, trying to identify the exact moment someone stopped loving you, or maybe never loved you at all. The next morning, things got worse, much worse. Emily called before sunrise. Her voice was urgent. Dad, you need to come over. I was there within 20 minutes. When I arrived, she already had several documents spread across the table, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. What happened? She slid a document toward me. I looked down. It was an insurance policy, one I recognized immediately. A large life insurance policy. Mine. What about it? Emily pointed to a section near the bottom. I followed her finger. Then my blood turned cold. Because someone had recently requested beneficiary modifications. Not completed. Requested. Requested. I stared at the page, trying to understand what I was seeing. Then realization struck. Someone was positioning themselves, preparing, planning, thinking ahead, way ahead. And suddenly every alarm bell in my head started ringing. Because this was no longer just about cheating, no longer just about money, no longer just about inheritance. This was becoming something far darker, something far more dangerous. I looked at Emily. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. We were both thinking the same thing. What if we were already too late? What if Vanessa and Ethan weren't simply waiting for me to die? What if they were preparing to speed things up? The possibility terrified me. And what happened 48 hours later would convince me that my fears weren't paranoia. Because 2 nights later, I overheard a conversation that proved just how close I had come to losing everything. And maybe something even more important than everything. My life. But before I tell you what I heard, let me ask you something. If you discovered someone you trusted was secretly planning against you, would you confront them immediately? Or would you stay silent long enough to learn the entire truth? Because my answer to that question nearly changed the outcome of everything that followed. And trust me, the next chapter is where the real war begins. 2 nights later, I came closer to exposing everything than at any other point during the entire ordeal. And if I had, the story would have ended very differently. It was a Sunday evening. Vanessa had spent most of the afternoon acting unusually cheerful. Not normal cheerful. Excited cheerful. The kind of excitement people struggle to hide when they believe something good is about to happen. I noticed it immediately. The problem was, once you know someone is lying to you, you start noticing things you would have ignored before. The extra smile, the sudden kindness, the hidden glance at a phone, the brief look of disappointment when a plan changes. It's amazing how much you miss when you trust someone completely. And it's amazing how much you see when that trust is gone. That evening, Vanessa told me she was meeting a friend for dinner. A friend I'd never heard of before. A friend she couldn't stop talking about. A friend who conveniently appeared out of nowhere. The moment she left the house, I called Emily. I think something's happening. What happened? I explained everything. The excitement, the strange behavior, the mysterious dinner. Emily became quiet. Then she said something that surprised me. Follow her. For a moment, I just stared at the phone. Follow her? Yes. I've never followed anyone in my life. Neither have I, Dad. But we're way past normal now. She was right. Way past normal. 30 minutes later, I found myself sitting in my truck 3 rows away from a small upscale restaurant downtown. The kind of place people choose when they're discussing important things. The kind of place where expensive decisions get made. I watched Vanessa walk inside, and then I waited. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. 20 minutes. Nothing. 30 minutes. Then Ethan arrived, my son-in-law, the man who was supposed to be married to my daughter, the man who was supposed to be part of our family, the man who had looked me in the eye countless times and called me Dad. I felt a wave of anger rise inside me, but I stayed put, because Emily was right. We needed the truth, all of it, not just enough to feel justified. Enough to win. Ethan entered the restaurant. 5 minutes later, another man joined them. A man I'd never seen before. Middle-aged, expensive suit, confident posture. The kind of man who looked like he spent his life negotiating deals. I immediately took photos, sent them to Emily. Her reply arrived less than 2 minutes later, and nearly made me drop my phone. I know who he is. My pulse quickened. Who? He works for the development group. For a moment I forgot how to breathe. The development group. The same people connected to the documents. The same people connected to the proposal. The same people interested in my land. Suddenly, the entire evening took on a different meaning. This wasn't a romantic meeting. This was business. I watched them through the restaurant window for nearly 2 hours. Talking, laughing, reviewing documents. At one point, Vanessa actually raised a glass in celebration. While sitting with the man helping orchestrate my destruction. I don't think I've ever felt rage like that before. Not when competitors tried to steal contracts. Not when employees betrayed me. Not even when I buried my first wife. This was different. This was personal. And for the first time since discovering the affair, I wanted revenge. Not justice. Not truth. Revenge. The kind that keeps people awake at night. The kind that makes them regret every choice that led them to that moment. Have you ever felt that? Not anger. Not frustration. Pure betrayal. The kind that makes your hands shake. The kind that changes how you see people forever. If you have, then you know exactly what I mean. A little after 9 o'clock, the meeting ended. The 3 of them left together. Laughing, smiling, completely unaware that I was watching. Completely unaware that their entire plan was already beginning to unravel. But what happened next changed everything. Because instead of immediately going home, Vanessa and Ethan drove somewhere else. Together. The development executive left. They continued on alone, and suddenly I realized something. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a celebration. I followed them to a small house on the outskirts of town, one I'd never seen before. The lights were already on when they arrived. And when they went inside, I did something I never imagined myself doing. I got out of the truck. I moved closer, slowly, carefully, keeping to the shadows, The house sat near a wooded area, dark enough to approach without being seen. I could hear voices through an open window. Not every word, just fragments, pieces, enough. Enough to destroy whatever hope I still had left. I heard Ethan laugh. Then I heard Vanessa. Then I heard a sentence I'll never forget. Just a little longer. Silence. Then another voice, the executive. He'll never see it coming. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked. Then Ethan answered. No, he trusts her completely. The words hit me like a punch. He trusts her completely. Not trusted. Trusts. Present tense. They were talking about me, using my trust as a weapon, using my love as a weapon, using my family as a weapon. And then came the sentence that truly terrified me. The sentence that made me realize how dangerous this situation had become. Vanessa laughed softly. Then she said, "Once the paperwork is finished, none of it will matter anyway." Paperwork. What paperwork? What were they talking about? What was so important that it would change everything? I wanted answers, desperately. But before I could hear more, my phone vibrated. Emily. I answered immediately. Dad, you won't believe what I'm hearing. Leave. What? Leave right now. I frowned. Why? Her voice sounded frightened, actually frightened. Because I just found something. What? A long silence. Then she spoke. Dad, I think they've already started the transfer process. My stomach dropped. What transfer process? The answer came like a gunshot. The assets. I couldn't speak. For several seconds, I simply stood there beside that house, listening to my daughter breathe, trying to process what she'd just said. Then, she added 6 words that changed the entire direction of our strategy. We're running out of time. And suddenly, the war we'd been quietly preparing for became something else entirely. A race. A race against people who believed victory was already guaranteed. A race against paperwork we couldn't yet see. A race against plans we still didn't fully understand. But what Emily uncovered that night would reveal the most dangerous part of their scheme. And once we saw it, there was no turning back. Because the next discovery proved one thing beyond all doubt. Vanessa and Ethan weren't simply planning for my future. They were actively trying to control it. And the evidence was finally becoming impossible to ignore. The moment Emily said we were running out of time, I knew everything had changed. Up until then, we'd been gathering information, watching, waiting, building our case. Now we were fighting the clock. I drove straight to Emily's house that night. The roads were empty, dark, silent, but my mind wasn't. My thoughts were moving so fast I could barely focus on driving. Every possibility felt worse than the last. What if they succeeded? What if we were already too late? What if everything I'd spent 40 years building was already slipping away? By the time I arrived, Emily was sitting at the dining room table, surrounded by paperwork, legal documents, financial statements, trust records, property agreements. The entire table looked like a war room. She didn't even look up when I entered. She simply slid a folder toward me. "You need to read this." I opened it. Within seconds, I felt sick. Because this wasn't speculation anymore. It wasn't theory. It was proof. Actual proof. Someone had initiated preliminary discussions involving several of my assets. Not sold, not transferred, not yet. But positioned, prepared, moved into place. Like pieces on a chessboard. The goal was becoming painfully clear. They wanted control before I realized what was happening. And the worst part? They were counting on me staying exactly who I'd always been. Trusting, generous, predictable. I looked at Emily. How did they think they'd pull this off? She sighed. Because people like them always make the same mistake. What mistake? They think good people are weak. That hit me harder than anything, because she was right. My entire life, I'd believed trust was a strength. I'd believed kindness mattered. I'd believed honesty still meant something. Meanwhile, people like Ethan saw those qualities as opportunities, weaknesses, tools, open doors. The next document explained everything. And when I saw it, I finally understood why they'd become so confident. Over the previous year, Vanessa had gradually encouraged me to consolidate several holdings. Nothing suspicious on its own, nothing alarming. In fact, most financial advisors would have recommended something similar. Simplify, organize, streamline, make life easier. And that's exactly what I'd done. But now, looking at the bigger picture, the strategy became obvious. The simpler my holdings became, the easier they would be to control later. Every move had been deliberate, every suggestion carefully timed, every conversation leading toward the same destination. I sat back in my chair, stunned. Have you ever looked back and realized someone had been manipulating you for years without you noticing? Not days, not weeks, years. If you've ever experienced that, you know how horrifying it feels. You start replaying everything, every conversation, every recommendation, every decision, wondering which parts were genuine and which parts were calculated. And sometimes that's the hardest part, not discovering the betrayal, discovering how long it was happening. Emily continued digging through documents. Then suddenly she froze, the same way she had before, the same expression, the same silence, and immediately my stomach dropped. What now? She slowly turned her laptop. Dad, her voice sounded almost disbelieving. I found their timeline. I leaned forward. Timeline? The document wasn't labeled as a timeline. It appeared to be an email exchange. But as we read through it, the truth emerged. Every major step had been planned, mapped out, scheduled, years in advance, meeting dates, financial milestones, legal objectives, projected outcomes. And there, sitting in plain sight, was something neither of us expected. A target date. 6 weeks away. 6 weeks. I stared at it, then read it again. 6 weeks. Whatever they were planning, whatever paperwork they needed, whatever final move they intended to make, it was supposed to happen in 6 weeks. No wonder Vanessa had been acting excited. No wonder Ethan looked relaxed. They thought they were approaching the finish line. I felt anger boiling inside me. But beneath the anger was something else. Determination. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, we knew when. And knowing when changes everything. A hunter who knows where prey will appear has an advantage. A general who knows when an attack is coming has an advantage. And now we had one too. Emily immediately started making calls. Lawyers, accountants, people she trusted, people who owed her favors. Within 48 hours, a quiet team had formed around us. Not publicly, not officially, but strategically. Everyone reviewing different pieces. Everyone looking for weaknesses. Everyone searching for leverage. And that's when another breakthrough arrived. A huge one. One of the attorneys called Emily late Friday afternoon. I could tell from her expression that something significant had happened. When she hung up, she smiled for the first time in weeks. A real smile. Not forced, not cautious, hopeful. What is it? She looked at me. They made a mistake. I almost laughed. After everything we'd uncovered, the idea that they'd actually made a mistake seemed impossible. But they had, a big one, because in their confidence they had left a trail. Not just communications, not just documents, financial movements, movements that connected people who should never have been connected. And suddenly, the entire conspiracy became easier to prove, much easier. For the first time, I began to believe we might actually win. Not survive, win. But victories are dangerous because they make you comfortable, and comfort creates mistakes. The very next day, I almost made one, a catastrophic one. It happened during a family gathering. One simple moment, one unexpected comment, one smile from Ethan, and I nearly exposed everything. Looking back now, if Emily hadn't been there, the entire plan would have collapsed. Because what Ethan said to me that afternoon was so arrogant, so insulting, so unbelievably calculated, that it took every ounce of self-control I possessed not to destroy him on the spot. And trust me when I say this. The next chapter was the closest I ever came to blowing the entire operation apart. But what happened afterward gave us something even more valuable than evidence. It gave us their confidence. And confident people make reckless mistakes. The kind of mistakes that eventually destroy them. The family gathering happened the following Saturday. And to this day, I still believe it was one of the hardest afternoons of my life. Not because of what happened. Because of what didn't happen. I didn't expose them. I didn't confront them. I didn't throw them out of my house. And every instinct in my body was screaming for me to do exactly that. The gathering itself looked completely normal. That's what made it so surreal. The sun was shining. The grill was going. My grandchildren were playing in the backyard. Neighbors stopped by to say hello. It looked like the kind of afternoon people take pictures of. The kind of afternoon people remember fondly years later. Meanwhile, I knew that two of the people sitting at my table were actively trying to destroy me, and they were smiling while doing it. Vanessa arrived first. She kissed my cheek, asked how I was feeling, told me I looked tired. The irony almost made me laugh. Of course I looked tired. I'd spent weeks uncovering her lies. Then Ethan arrived, confident, relaxed, comfortable. The confidence surprised me. If I was secretly having an affair and participating in a scheme against my own family, I would have been nervous, paranoid, careful, but not Ethan. He looked like a man who believed he'd already won. That realization bothered me, because confidence usually comes from certainty, and certainty usually comes from information. What did he know that I didn't? The question stayed in my mind all afternoon. Then something happened. Something small. Something most people would have ignored. But once you've learned to look for signs, you start seeing everything. Ethan and Vanessa shared a glance. Just a glance. Less than a second. Yet it told me everything. There was familiarity there, comfort, secrets. The kind of silent communication people develop when they've been hiding something for a long time. My stomach turned, and suddenly I understood exactly why affairs are so devastating. It's not just the betrayal, it's realizing how many moments happened right in front of you. Moments you missed, moments that only make sense afterward. Have you ever experienced that? Looking back and suddenly understanding things that once seemed innocent. It's a terrible feeling, like discovering hidden messages buried inside your own memories. A little later, everyone gathered around the patio table. Conversation flowed naturally. Sports, politics, weather, the usual topics. Then Ethan looked at me and smiled. "Dad, have you thought any more about retirement?" The question immediately caught my attention, because lately he'd been asking variations of it constantly. Retirement, selling assets, simplifying life, stepping back. At first I thought it was concern. Now I knew better. I forced a smile. "Sometimes," he nodded. You've earned it. I could feel Emily watching him from across the table, watching every word, every movement, every expression, the same way I was. Then Ethan leaned back and said something that nearly destroyed weeks of planning. You know, sometimes holding on to things too long creates problems for the next generation. The table fell quiet. Not completely silent, but quieter. I don't think anyone else noticed. I did, because I knew exactly what he was talking about. The land, the company, the assets, everything he wanted, everything he thought would soon belong to him. The arrogance behind that statement was unbelievable. And for one dangerous moment, I almost snapped, I almost stood up, almost told everyone exactly who he was, almost revealed everything. My hands actually clenched beneath the table. I could feel my pulse pounding. Then I looked at Emily, and she gave me the slightest shake of her head. No, not yet. Somehow I stayed quiet. Looking back now, that single decision changed everything. Because 5 minutes later, Ethan made the biggest mistake of his life. It happened when one of the neighbors asked about a new development project being discussed in town. An innocent question, completely unrelated. Or so it seemed. The neighbor mentioned several investment groups competing for land. Immediately, Ethan joined the conversation. Too quickly, too eagerly, and that's when he slipped. Not dramatically, not obviously, just enough. Enough for someone paying attention. Enough for us. He referenced information that wasn't public, information that hadn't been announced. Information only insiders would know. The moment he said it, I saw Emily's eyes narrow. She caught it too. Ethan realized his mistake almost immediately. He tried to backtrack, tried to laugh it off, but the damage was done. Because now we had something new. Proof that his connection to the development group ran deeper than he wanted anyone to know. And that wasn't all. The real breakthrough came later that evening. After most guests had left, after the sun started setting, after people relaxed, that's when mistakes happen. When people stop being careful, Vanessa stepped inside to take a phone call. Or at least that's what she thought she was doing. A few minutes later, Emily quietly followed her. Not close enough to be noticed. Close enough to hear. And what she overheard changed everything. When Vanessa returned, Emily looked pale. Actually pale. I pulled her aside immediately. What happened? For several seconds she didn't answer. Then she finally spoke. Dad, what? They've moved up the timeline. The words hit me like a punch. What do you mean? The 6 weeks? Yeah. It's not 6 weeks anymore. Every muscle in my body tightened. How long? Emily swallowed hard, then answered 2. 2 weeks. Not 6. 2. Suddenly, every plan we'd made felt inadequate. Every preparation felt incomplete. Every day suddenly mattered. And worse, according to the conversation she overheard, they believed the final paperwork was nearly finished. Nearly finished. Which meant we weren't just racing anymore. We were losing. For the first time since this nightmare started, genuine fear entered the picture. Because if we failed, everything could disappear. Everything. My future, my legacy, my family's security, gone. But what neither Vanessa nor Ethan realized was that their confidence had blinded them. Because while they were celebrating victory, Emily had already found something that could destroy them completely. Something hidden, something devastating. Something so powerful that once it surfaced, there would be no recovering from it. And when we finally uncovered the truth 3 days later, the entire conspiracy began to collapse. Not slowly, not gradually, all at once, like a house built on rotten foundations. And trust me, the next chapter is where everything starts falling apart for them. 3 days later, everything changed. Not because we found another affair message. Not because we uncovered another financial document. Not because someone made another careless mistake. What we found was much bigger than that. Much bigger. It started with a phone call. I was sitting in my office reviewing old project records when Emily called. The moment I heard her voice, I knew something was different. She sounded excited. Not hopeful. Excited. And after everything we'd been through, excitement was rare. "Dad, where are you?" "Office. Come to my house." "Now, what happened?" "Just come." Then she hung up. No explanation, no details, nothing. The drive felt longer than usual. Every possibility ran through my mind. Had they accelerated the paperwork again? Had they discovered we were investigating them? Had something gone wrong? When I arrived, Emily was waiting outside. And for the first time in weeks, she was smiling, actually smiling. I hadn't seen that smile since before this nightmare began. "What happened?" She didn't answer. Instead, she led me inside. Straight to her dining room. Straight to her laptop. Straight to the evidence. Then she turned the screen toward me. "Dad, what am I looking at?" The end. At first, I didn't understand. Then I started reading, and suddenly, everything made sense. Every piece, every lie, every secret, every betrayal. Because hidden inside hundreds of messages was something they never expected anyone to find. A side agreement. A private agreement. One that wasn't supposed to exist. One that connected everyone. Vanessa, Ethan, the development group, and several financial intermediaries. The document was devastating. Not morally. Legally. The kind of document lawyers dream about finding. The kind of document that destroys defenses. The kind of document people spend years trying to hide. My eyes moved line by line, paragraph by paragraph. Then I reached the section that made my heart stop, the compensation section. I read it twice. Then a third time. Then I looked at Emily. "They put this in writing?" She nodded. I couldn't believe it. After years of planning. Years of manipulation, years of secrecy. They had documented everything, everything. Projected profits, ownership percentages, expected payouts, future asset allocations, all of it in writing. The greed practically leaked off the page. And right there, buried near the bottom, was the detail that shattered whatever sympathy I still had left. Vanessa's payout. I stared at the number, the amount she expected to receive once everything was completed. The amount she expected to receive after betraying me, after lying to me, after helping destroy my family. The amount wasn't just large, it was life-changing, and suddenly every question I'd been asking myself disappeared. Did she love me? Was any of it real? Did she ever care? Those questions stopped mattering. Because people who truly love you don't assign a dollar amount to your destruction. People who love you don't calculate profits from your suffering. People who love you don't sign agreements planning their future around your downfall. Maybe you've learned that lesson too. Maybe you've had someone show you exactly who they were when money became involved. If you have, you know how painful it is. Not because money matters more than people. Because discovering someone values money more than people changes everything. For several minutes, I just sat there, silent, reading, processing, trying to absorb the reality of what I was seeing. Then Emily pointed toward another section. "Dad, keep reading." I did, and what came next shocked me even more. Because Vanessa wasn't the mastermind. Not entirely. Neither was Ethan. The real architect was someone else. Someone we'd barely considered. The development executive. The man from the restaurant. The man I'd watched celebrating with them. The man coordinating everything behind the scenes. And according to the agreement, he wasn't just facilitating the deal, he was funding portions of it. Funding. That single word changed everything. Because suddenly this wasn't just betrayal, it wasn't just fraud, it wasn't just manipulation, it was conspiracy, organized, documented, trackable, prosecutable. For the first time, the scale became clear. I looked at Emily. What happens now? She leaned back. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she looked confident. Not cautious, not worried. Confident. Now we let them keep talking. I frowned. Why? Because they're scared. That surprised me. Scared? She nodded. They moved up the timeline for a reason. The realization hit me immediately. They weren't accelerating because they were winning. They were accelerating because something had changed. Something had made them nervous. And nervous people make mistakes. Big mistakes. The next 72 hours proved her right, because suddenly communication between them increased dramatically. More calls, more meetings, more messages, more activity. It was as if they could sense pressure building, not enough to know where it was coming from, enough to feel it. And when people panic, patterns break, discipline disappears, mistakes multiply. That's exactly what happened. On the second evening, Ethan sent a message that changed everything. A message so reckless, so careless, so unbelievably arrogant, that even Emily stared at the screen in disbelief. The message wasn't long. Just a few sentences. But it contained something we'd been searching for since the beginning. Intent. Clear. Direct. Undeniable intent. No interpretation required. No explanation possible. No defense available. Just pure intent. Documented forever. I remember laughing when I read it. Not because it was funny. Because I finally realized they weren't as smart as they thought they were. Far from it. The entire scheme depended on secrecy, and secrecy was disappearing, fast. By the end of the week, our legal team had everything they needed. Everything. The affair, the financial connections, the hidden agreements, the developments scheme, the asset positioning, the communications, the intent. Everything. Years of planning, years of manipulation, years of deception, all sitting inside organized folders, ready, waiting, prepared. The trap was finally complete. But before we moved, Emily insisted on one last thing, one final step, one final piece of evidence, one final opportunity for them to reveal who they really were. At first, I disagreed. I thought we already had enough, more than enough. But Emily convinced me. And thank God she did. Because what happened during that final meeting would become the single most satisfying moment of my entire life. The moment everything collapsed. The moment every lie came crashing down. The moment Ethan and Vanessa realized they had lost. Not financially, not legally, completely. And trust me when I say this. The next chapter contains the confrontation they never saw coming. The final trap began on a Tuesday, and the strange thing is, it looked like a celebration. If you had walked into my house that evening, you would have seen exactly what Vanessa and Ethan saw. A happy man, a relaxed atmosphere, a family gathering, good food, good conversation, nothing suspicious, nothing threatening, nothing that would have warned them their entire world was about to collapse. That was the point. Emily had designed it that way. Every detail, every invitation, every conversation, every seat at the table, planned, calculated, perfect. Looking back now, I almost admire how flawlessly she executed it. Almost. 3 days earlier, I had casually mentioned something during dinner. An opportunity. A potential opportunity. One involving the land. The very land everyone had been fighting over. I made it sound accidental, like I was finally reconsidering my position, like age was catching up with me, like I was ready to simplify my life. Exactly the story they wanted to hear. The reaction was immediate. Vanessa practically lit up. She tried hiding it. Failed. Ethan wasn't much better. By the following morning, communication between them exploded. Messages, calls, meetings, everything intensified. The bait had worked perfectly. They believed victory was finally within reach. What they didn't know was that every move they made afterward strengthened our case. Every conversation, every message, every celebration, they were documenting their own downfall. By Tuesday evening, everyone was gathered. Vanessa, Ethan, several family members, a few close friends, even 2 people they didn't recognize, people Emily had invited, people who happened to be attorneys. Though Ethan and Vanessa didn't know that yet. Dinner started normally. Painfully normally. We talked, laughed, shared stories. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. And that's what made it so effective. Because eventually people relax. Eventually masks slip. Eventually confidence returns. That's exactly what happened. By dessert, Ethan looked completely comfortable. Vanessa looked happier than I'd seen her in months. The future they thought they'd stolen was practically within reach. Then I stood up. The room quieted. I raised my glass and smiled. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. A few people nodded. Others smiled. Vanessa reached for my hand. The same hand she'd spent years pretending to care about. I gently pulled it away. Her smile faltered, just slightly. Enough. I've spent the last several weeks doing a lot of thinking. The room remained silent. Everyone listening. Waiting. Watching. Exactly as planned. I've been thinking about family. I looked directly at Ethan, then Vanessa, then back at everyone else. Trust. Another pause. Legacy. Now the atmosphere was changing. People could feel it. They didn't know why, but they could feel it. The same way animals sense a storm before it arrives. Then I continued. I've also been thinking about betrayal. The room went completely silent. Vanessa's expression changed immediately. Not panic, not yet. Concern, confusion, uncertainty. Ethan shifted slightly in his chair, the first sign of discomfort. And for the first time all evening, I saw doubt enter his eyes. I reached into my jacket, removed a folder, and placed it on the table. The sound seemed impossibly loud. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then I looked directly at Ethan. Ethan. His face tightened. Yes? How long have you been sleeping with my wife? Silence. Absolute silence. The kind of silence that feels physical. The kind that sucks the air out of a room. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. For a moment, Ethan simply stared at me. Frozen. Vanessa looked like she'd been struck by lightning. Then came the denial. Predictable. Immediate. What? Ethan laughed nervously. Dad, what are you talking about? I opened the folder, removed several photographs, placed them on the table. One by one. Photographs. Restaurant photographs. Meeting photographs. Evidence. Undeniable evidence. The laughter disappeared instantly. The room erupted. Questions. Shock. Confusion, voices overlapping. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. Because the affair was never the real story. The real story was far worse. I raised my hand. The room quieted again. Then I removed another document. The agreement. The side agreement. The document that connected everything. I slid it across the table. Directly toward Vanessa. I watched her read the first page, then the second, then the third. The color drained from her face. Because for the first time, she realized how much we knew. Not some, all, everything, every lie, every secret, every plan, every conversation, every betrayal, all of it. And then something fascinating happened. The alliance broke. Instantly. Completely. Because that's what happens when selfish people get caught. They don't protect each other. They protect themselves. Vanessa looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Vanessa. And suddenly neither trusted the other anymore. The blames started immediately. You told me. No, you said. That wasn't the agreement. You promised. The arguments came fast, loud, desperate. And every sentence revealed even more. It's amazing how much truth people tell when they're panicking. Have you ever noticed that? When lies stop working, people become surprisingly honest. The attorney sitting quietly at the end of the table certainly noticed every admission, every accusation, every contradiction. Everything was being documented. Everything. Then came the moment I'll never forget. The moment that made every sleepless night worthwhile. Emily stood up. My daughter. The woman who had protected me when I couldn't protect myself. The woman who had spent months building this case. The woman who saved our family. She looked directly at Ethan. Then she spoke. You didn't lose tonight. The room fell silent. Everyone listening. Everyone watching. Then she continued. You lost the day you decided Dad's trust was something you could exploit. Ethan couldn't even answer. For the first time since I'd known him, he had nothing to say. No excuse, no explanation, no manipulation, nothing. Because the truth was finally standing in the room with him. And the truth is very difficult to argue with, especially when it's documented. The meeting ended shortly afterward, not with shouting, not with drama, something better, reality. The reality that their plan was dead. The reality that investigations were already underway. The reality that lawsuits had been prepared. The reality that consequences were coming. Serious consequences. But the most satisfying part wasn't watching them leave. It wasn't seeing the fear. It wasn't seeing the panic. It was seeing Emily smile. Because for the first time in months, neither of us was carrying the burden anymore. The truth was finally out. The masks were gone. The game was over. Or so we thought. Because what happened afterward surprised everyone, including me, especially me. And the final chapter isn't about revenge. It's about consequences. Because sometimes losing the scheme isn't the worst punishment. Sometimes watching your entire life collapse afterward is. And trust me, that's exactly what happened next. People often imagine revenge as a single moment, a dramatic confrontation, a crushing victory, a perfect ending. The truth is very different. Real consequences arrive slowly, piece by piece, day by day. And sometimes watching those consequences unfold is far more powerful than any confrontation could ever be. The morning after the dinner, I woke up before sunrise. For the first time in months, I wasn't carrying a secret. For the first time in months, I wasn't pretending. No lies, no acting, no hidden investigation, just truth. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat on the back porch. The same porch where I had spent countless mornings over the years, watching the sun rise, watching seasons change, thinking about life. But that morning felt different. The weight I'd been carrying was finally gone. Not completely. The pain remained, the betrayal remained, but the burden was gone. And there is a difference. A very important difference. Pain can heal. Burdens only grow heavier. Around 8 o'clock, Emily arrived. She carried 2 coffees, one for herself, one for me. Neither of us said much at first. We simply sat there, watching the sunrise, enjoying something we'd almost lost. Peace. Eventually she smiled. A tired smile, but a real one. "You okay?" I thought about the question. Really thought about it. Then I nodded. "I think I will be." That was the truth. Not perfect, not healed, not fixed, but better, much better. The legal consequences started almost immediately. Within days, formal proceedings began. The development executive found himself facing investigations from multiple directions. His company quickly distanced itself. Partners disappeared. Investors vanished. People who had once celebrated with him suddenly stopped answering his calls. Funny how that works. Success attracts crowds. Failure reveals who was never loyal in the first place. The hidden agreements became public. The financial trails became impossible to explain. The evidence spoke for itself, and evidence doesn't care about excuses. Meanwhile, Ethan's life began unraveling. Not all at once, gradually. The way ropes unravel when enough pressure is applied. First came professional consequences, then financial consequences, then personal consequences. Relationships vanished. Opportunities disappeared. Trust evaporated. Because trust is difficult to earn and almost impossible to rebuild after you've shattered it. Have you ever noticed that? A reputation can take decades to build. One decision can destroy it. One moment, one choice, one betrayal. That's all it takes. Several months later, Ethan requested a meeting. Just the two of us. At first I refused, then I reconsidered. Not because I owed him anything, because I wanted closure. Real closure. The meeting took place at a small coffee shop. When I arrived, I barely recognized him. The confidence was gone. The arrogance was gone. The certainty was gone. He looked exhausted, older, smaller somehow. Like the weight of his decisions had finally caught up with him. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at me and said something I never expected. I threw away everything. Not an excuse, not a defense, not a justification, a confession. Simple, honest, painful. I studied him for a long moment. Then I asked the question that had haunted me for months. Why? He lowered his eyes, and his answer taught me something important, because it wasn't greed. Not entirely. It wasn't love, not even close. It was entitlement. The belief that he deserved things he hadn't earned. The belief that shortcuts were justified. The belief that other people's trust existed to be exploited. And entitlement is dangerous, because it convinces people they are victims when they're actually villains. It convinces people they're owed rewards they never earned. It convinces people that betrayal is acceptable if the outcome benefits them. I listened. Then I stood up, and before leaving, I said the only thing that mattered. You didn't lose because you got caught. He looked up, confused. I continued. You lost because you stopped being the man my daughter believed you were. Then I walked away, and I never saw him again. As for Vanessa, that chapter ended differently. A few months after everything happened, she sent me a letter. Not a text, not an email. A handwritten letter. 12 pages. I read every word. Some parts were apologies. Some parts were explanations. Some parts were regrets. And for a long time, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Then one evening I realized something. Forgiveness and reconciliation aren't the same thing. You can forgive someone without inviting them back into your life. You can release the anger without restoring the relationship. That's exactly what I chose. I forgave her. Eventually. For myself, not for her, because carrying anger forever only creates another prison. And I was finally done living in prisons. The following spring, something remarkable happened. Something I never expected. Something far more valuable than revenge. My family became closer than ever. Emily and I started having dinner together every Sunday. Not because of the investigation. Not because of the betrayal. Because we genuinely enjoyed the time together. The grandchildren visited more often. The house felt alive again. Laughter returned. Peace returned. Life returned. And one afternoon, while watching my grandchildren play in the yard, I realized something. The people who tried to take everything from me failed. Not because we had better lawyers. Not because we had better evidence. Not because we were smarter. They failed because they misunderstood what mattered. They thought my greatest asset was the land, or the money, or the investments. They were wrong. My greatest asset was sitting beside me the entire time. My daughter. The daughter who protected me. The daughter who believed me. The daughter who refused to let me fight alone. If you've made it this far into the story, I want to ask you something. Who is that person in your life? The person who would stand beside you when everything falls apart? The person who would protect you when you couldn't protect yourself? Tell me in the comments, because those people are rare. And when you find them, never take them for granted. Today, when I sit on that same porch with a cup of coffee in my hand, I don't think much about Ethan, or Vanessa, or the scheme, or the betrayal. I think about something else. I think about trust, not the trust that was broken, the trust that remained. The trust between a father and daughter, the trust that carried us through the worst chapter of our lives. The trust that saved everything worth saving. Because in the end, I didn't win because I got revenge. I won because the people who truly loved me never stopped fighting for me. And looking back now, that victory was worth far more than anything they ever tried to steal.